Me as a person, I will never stop looking, ever. You drive down the road, you are constantly looking.
But we begin tonight with another major breaking story. Nearly 15 years after 3 young brothers vanished, their father is now charged with murder.
It was Thanksgiving 2010, but for 3 young boys, it was the beginning of a disturbing mystery. Andrew, 9, Alexander, 7, and Tanner, just 5 years old, spent the afternoon playing in their father's backyard in Morenci, Michigan. But by the next morning, those boys were gone. Just like that, without a trace or signs or clues. No one had seen them leave, and the only person who seemed to know where they were was their father, John Skelton. And yet, he refused to say a word. For 15 long years, John stuck to a story that no one believed, that his sons were taken by a mysterious underground group, one that he claimed had been protecting them from their mother. A story that changed over time, unraveling more questions with each new version. But what really happened that night in Morenci? The answer, as it turns out, is far more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. This is the story of the Skelton brothers, a disappearance that haunted an entire town. As we unravel the events piece by piece, we'll attempt to answer the question that has tortured a mother and shaken the world for over a decade. What really happened to the Skelton boys? But before we begin, if you find this video interesting, please give it a like at the end and tell me what you think about the case. It really helps the channel. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more. Thank you. This video is created solely for educational and documentary purposes. It does not endorse, glorify, or condone any of the criminal actions or individuals described in this case. Viewer discretion is advised. Before the boys disappeared, the Skelton family seemed, on the surface, like any other family struggling through the ups and downs of life. John Skelton, a former long-haul truck driver, had always been a quiet, hard-working man, and his wife, Tanya Zuvers, was a devoted mother to their 3 sons, Andrew, 9, Alexander, 7, and Tanner, just 5. Despite the challenges they faced in their marriage, the boys were the heart of their world, and both John and Tanya loved them deeply, but behind closed doors, things were far from perfect. Their marriage had always been strained, with John's long hours on the road and Tanya's deepening concerns about his behavior. However, it was in September 2010 that the cracks in their relationship became undeniable. Tanya made the difficult decision to file for divorce. It was a move that would change everything. John, who had always been stubborn and controlling, didn't take the separation well. And instead of working through the process amicably, he began to act out in more extreme ways. John's behavior escalated, and by the time October rolled around, he was pushing hard to get Tanya and the children to move with him to Florida, despite knowing Tanya had no interest in relocating. He was already unemployed. His drunk driving conviction the previous year had cost him his job, and he had nothing left to hold on to, but he couldn't see that. His fixation on getting the family to Florida, without Tanya's consent, showed just how deep his obsession with control had become. Then, one fateful day in October, John took the boys out of school under the pretense of a family trip to Florida, without informing Tanya. She was blindsided when the school called to say the children had been picked up. She tried reaching John, but he was unreachable, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. When John finally answered, he assured her everything was fine. But by then, Tanya knew she had to act quickly. She contacted an attorney, and by September 13, 2010, she had taken legal steps to gain emergency custody of their sons, desperate to prevent John from taking them away for good. The judge granted Tanya emergency custody, but it was clear John was becoming more unpredictable by the day. John, however, had a different perspective. He began to claim that Tanya was and emotionally children, even alleging that the boys had told him that Tanya was them. This was a shocking and serious accusation, one that would paint Tanya in a dark light. John claimed that his decision to take the children away was an act of protection, a desperate move to shield them from harm. His accusations were deeply rooted in the fact that Tanya had a criminal history from 1998, when she was convicted of 4th-degree criminal conduct involving a teenage boy. Tanya, having served her sentence and moved on with her life, had been cleared in the family court proceedings, with no evidence of any current risk to her children. Nonetheless, John held on to this narrative, insisting that Tanya's past justified his actions. However, as investigators delved deeper, they found that John's claims were false. law enforcement had already reviewed Tanya's criminal record and had investigated the allegations against her. There was no evidence to support John's accusations, and all 3 judges who had overseen the custody battle had granted Tanya full custody of the children, despite her past. Thanksgiving Day, November 25, 2010, was supposed to be a time of togetherness, a chance to put aside the tensions of the past year and enjoy family. John Skelton had the boys for the holiday, as agreed in the midst of the ongoing custody battle with his wife, Tanya Zuvers. Despite the strain in their relationship, Tanya had agreed to let John spend Thanksgiving with Andrew, 9, Alexander, 7, and Tanner, 5, hoping it might ease the growing custody tensions between them. But little did she know that decision would mark the last time she would ever see her sons alive. That afternoon, the boys were last seen playing outside in John's backyard. But as the day wore on, things began to take a darker turn. John had promised Tanya that he would return the boys by 5 p.m., the agreed-upon time. Yet, when that time passed, Tanya still hadn't heard from him. The minutes turned into hours, and John's phone went silent. Tanya called him over and over again, each time more desperate than the last. She left messages, hoping for an explanation, but no response. What had happened to her sons? Why hadn't John returned them? She paced around her house, unsure of what to do, but she had no idea how serious things had become. But what Tanya didn't know at that moment was that John had posted something strange on Facebook just hours before, a message that seemed almost like a quiet admission of something evil. May God and Tanya forgive me. The next day, November 27, 2010, Tanya woke up with a sense of dread that only deepened as the hours passed. It had been more than 12 hours since John was supposed to return the boys. Tanya, desperate to get answers, made her way to John's house to pick up the boys, but when she arrived, the house was locked and there was no sign of life. She knocked on the door, but no one answered. Worry turned to panic as she realized the worst possible scenario was unfolding before her. She immediately called the police. When officers arrived and gained entry into the house, they were met with a scene that would haunt them for years to come. The house was in complete disarray, furniture overturned, shattered plates and broken objects scattered across the floor. The disarray inside was more than just a mess. It was as if a violent struggle had taken place. As the investigation began to unfold, John was located not at home, but in a hospital in Toledo, Ohio. He claimed that he had broken his ankle during an attempt. He told doctors he had tried to end his life by hanging himself, but his attempt had failed, and he fell, injuring his ankle in the process. On the surface, this seemed like an explanation, but there were too many inconsistencies for anyone to take John's version of events at face value. Why was he alone in Ohio? Why hadn't he returned the boys? His story seemed more like an attempt to gain sympathy or cover his tracks rather than a genuine cry for help. Something didn't add up. Back at John's house, as officers continued their investigation, they made a discovery that would change everything. A rope tied to a banister was found on the second floor of the house. And as if this wasn't enough, investigators found a 3-page letter addressed to Tanya. He wrote, "You'll hate me forever. I guess this is my final goodbye." The words seemed like a confession, a final plea for understanding, but they were also disturbing. John's story began to unravel almost as soon as the police started questioning him. Initially, he claimed that he had given the boys to a friend, a woman he named Joanne Taylor. According to John, Joanne was someone he had met online and trusted to take care of his children. But when the authorities dug into this claim, they found something unsettling. Joanne Taylor didn't exist. There were no records of her, no trace of any interaction between her and John, and no corroborating evidence to support his story. The more they investigated, the clearer it became that John's initial explanation was nothing but a fabrication.
A frantic search in the town of Morenci. The father, 39-year-old John Skelton, claims he gave them to a woman he met over the internet before trying to take his own life. He gave the name Joanne Taylor.
Up to this point, we have not been able to locate a Joanne Taylor or confirm that she...
Then John shifted his story yet again, this time introducing a new, even more bizarre theory. He claimed that the boys had been taken by an underground group, a clandestine organization dedicated to protecting children from abusive parents. This group, according to John, was called United Foster Outreach and Underground Sanctuaries, and it was supposedly run by a network of individuals who helped children escape dangerous homes. It sounded almost like a poorly thought-out excuse, but John seemed adamant. He insisted that the boys were safe, hidden away by this group, and that they would never be returned to Tanya, who he still insisted was a threat to their well-being. The problem was, there was no evidence to support John's claims. Investigators found no trace of any such organization existing anywhere. No one had ever heard of United Foster Outreach, and John's description of it seemed to grow more absurd with every retelling. To make matters more bizarre, John mentioned Mo Gingrich, a former Amish man who had no ties to the case. When authorities reached out to Mo, he denied even knowing John, let alone being involved in any underground child protection network. It quickly became clear that this was another desperate attempt by John to shift the blame and avoid any suspicion falling on him.
Skelton says he gave his sons, only 5, 7, and 9 years old, to an organization to protect them from his estranged wife, Tanya. Police have not accused her of any wrongdoing. Skelton now says he has doubts about the alleged group he gave his kids to.
I could have just been duped. They could have just scammed me and took my kids. I don't know.
As Action News first reported months ago, police found ropes and at least one noose in John's home when they searched it. John says none of what was seized in the home proves he hurt his sons. Your family released the search warrant return from your home the day that the boys were declared missing. And in that search warrant, it said that there was ropes and a noose found in your house, along with a lot of bleach and cleaning products. What exactly were those products for, and why was there a noose in your house?
Bleach and cleaning products. I don't know. You have 3 minutes. It was laundry soap in the bathroom. That's it.
You're saying you did not hurt the kids with that noose?
I did. They never even saw that.
Okay, and
They
you
never saw it at all.
did you say that was for a project?
Yes.
Can you describe the project at all?
No. Not right now because of the investigation. The ropes were for a cradle harness. I guess that's what you call it. So I was making a harness to go around my waist and legs, like a rope climbing.
Also, according to the search warrant return, a bullet was found on a stair inside John's home. Skelton says it was part of an old gun collection, which is long gone.
I had them since I lived.
As investigators pushed harder, they discovered a disturbing pattern in John's behavior. His internet searches revealed a chilling preoccupation with methods of harm. Among the search history, investigators found queries like how to break a neck and can rat poison kill a person? These were not the searches of someone trying to help his children escape from a dangerous home. They were the searches of someone who was considering how to hurt them.
The family and investigators left with puzzling questions.
Why would he not come to the family? You know, if you need to take the children somewhere, why take them to somebody else?
Kathy Herrera, spokesperson for the mother Tanya Skelton, seen here with her boys, 9-year-old Andrew, 7-year-old Alexander, and 5-year-old Tanner. The separated couple spent Thanksgiving together with the boys. John Skelton rushed to an Ohio hospital Friday afternoon after a failed suicide attempt. An Amber Alert issued for the 3 boys later that day. This chilling post left on his Facebook page Wednesday.
It says, "I love my wife very much. May God and Tanya forgive me."
Police searching the family home and taking the father's minivan as evidence last night. A K-9 unit searching the ground in nearby areas. A helicopter with thermal imaging technology scanning above. Police also searching the web for any clue that could lead them to these missing little boys.
We have computer forensic investigators that are working on many aspects.
By February 2011, the investigation into the disappearance of Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner Skelton had taken a dark turn. What had started as a missing persons case, one filled with hope that the boys might still be alive, was now officially classified as a homicide investigation. Authorities were no longer convinced the boys were alive. The search for them had stretched on for months, but with each passing day, the likelihood of a happy resolution grew slimmer. However, The investigation soon focused on a key piece of evidence, John's cell phone records. The records showed a significant clue that would prove pivotal in the case. John's phone was tracked leaving Morenci, where he had lived with his family, and traveling south into Ohio in the early hours of November 26, 2010, the day after Thanksgiving. The phone was tracked to a location approximately 20 miles away from Morenci, and then it went offline for a period of time. Investigators believed that this brief but significant trip was when John disposed of the bodies. It seemed clear that during this window of time, John had been alone with the boys, and it was during these crucial hours that he likely took their lives and hid their remains. At a court hearing in early 2011, John was presented with the evidence against him, but he remained defiant. The judge, frustrated with his lack of cooperation, found him in contempt of court for refusing to provide any information about his sons.
Are you prepared to make the children immediately available to Mrs. Skelton?
I have no way of doing that.
Tanya Skelton also took the stand and recounted that fateful day of her boy's disappearance. Then the judge asked again.
So is it your position you are not able to comply with the court order, or that you are unwilling to comply with the order?
Unable.
John Skelton faces parental kidnapping charges and now has a contempt of court charge hanging over his head in that custody case. Now Tanya Skelton has full custody of her 3 sons that she's not seen since before Thanksgiving.
As a result, John was held without bail, a clear indication that the legal system had already determined he was no longer a man being questioned about a missing persons case. And by September 2011, he pleaded no contest to the charges of unlawful imprisonment in connection with the disappearance of his 3 sons. It was a decision that many saw as an attempt to avoid a more severe sentence, or perhaps to shield himself from facing even more serious charges. However, despite the no contest plea, the more serious charges of kidnapping were dropped. John's sentence was set at 10 to 15 years in prison, the maximum allowed for the unlawful imprisonment conviction.
Today marks the 8-year anniversary of the day the Skelton brothers vanished. We've been following their case from the very beginning. And now, in the most surprising twist yet, you're about to hear what their grandfather is saying about their mysterious disappearance.
This past summer, John Skelton Sr., his wife Roxanne, and daughter Lucinda went to visit John in prison. After that visit, they said they would never go back. Skelton says he feels John isn't sharing everything he knows.
He's hiding information. Well, I'm not gonna say he's not telling the truth, but I think he's telling the truth. But the truth, the whole story of the things concerned, he's hiding.
This is much different than what we heard from Skelton Sr. back when we visited the family at their home in Jacksonville in October of last year.
I don't care how drastic things could have gotten in his mind. He would have not hurt the boys.
There were things, bits and pieces I'd heard in the past, but when you sit back and objectively look at what he is saying and some of these other pieces that happened that were is willing to do what I think is going to have to be done on this whole situation, then I will be there with the state officials, and we will sit down as a conference and go from there.
There's no one out there that really believes his story truly. Does that help me? Absolutely, because it does kind of back him into a corner. At the end of the day, this case is very simple. John was their dad. He was with them the night that they went missing. And whatever we can do for him to make him feel comfortable enough to trust us, I'm willing to do.
Then in 2017, a glimmer of hope emerged, albeit one that would soon be shattered. A cleaning crew in Missoula, Montana made a startling discovery when they found bone fragments inside a shed. The fragments seemed to match the ages of the missing Skelton boys, and for a brief moment, the possibility that the boys might have been found alive, or at least their remains, seemed within reach. But the hope was short-lived. Forensic tests were quickly conducted, and the results revealed something that would dash any remaining hopes. The bones were over 100 years old, completely unrelated to the Skelton brothers. Then, in 2019, a new lead came in that sent investigators back to Ohio, The tip claimed that a witness had seen John's van parked near a pond in the area on Thanksgiving Day 2010, just hours before the boys went missing. The idea that the van was close to the location where they believed John had been during the early hours of November 26th made the tip seem credible, or at least worth investigating. Authorities quickly mobilized and returned to the area, conducting a thorough search of the pond and surrounding land, hoping to find something that could finally bring them closer to the truth. But once again, the search yielded nothing. There was no sign of the boys, no trace of their whereabouts, and no fresh evidence to explain their disappearance. As the investigation continued, the more John's shifting stories began to fuel the public's curiosity, with various theories emerging, each trying to explain what had happened to Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner Skelton. The first theory that gained traction was John's claim that the boys had been taken by an underground group, as earlier mentioned. As time went on, the murder theory gained traction, and it became the leading explanation among law enforcement officials and investigators. The evidence overwhelmingly pointed toward one conclusion: John Skelton had murdered his sons. Investigators believed that John unalived the boys sometime between Thanksgiving afternoon and the early morning hours of November 26, 2010, in a calculated act of revenge against Tanya. The motive, according to many, was to punish Tanya for winning custody of the boys and for ending their marriage. There were, however, other theories that surfaced over the years, though they were largely based on speculation. One of these was the trafficking theory, which suggested that the boys had been taken by human traffickers. Some believed that John had handed them off to a dangerous network, either in a misguided attempt to protect them or out of desperation. This theory gained some attention, especially in online forums and true crime circles, where people speculated that John might have unknowingly connected with traffickers. However, investigators found no leads linking John to any trafficking rings, and his phone and computer records showed no communication with any known predators or criminals. No suspicious financial transactions or records of such dealings ever surfaced. It seemed clear that while the idea of trafficking was a gripping narrative, it simply didn't align with the facts of the case. Another variation of the theory that gained some ground was the off-grid theory. Some speculated that the boys might have been hidden away by a secluded community, perhaps an Amish or Mennonite group, or even relocated abroad. This theory was grounded in the idea that John, in his increasingly disturbed state, might have placed the boys with a group that lived off the grid, where they would be beyond the reach of the law. But again, no evidence ever emerged to substantiate this theory. Investigators conducted thorough searches in Amish communities and checked with known off-grid groups, but found no trace of the boys. In the end, the murder theory stood as the most credible and widely accepted explanation, supported by the circumstantial evidence, John's actions, and his inconsistent statements. However, in November 2025, nearly 15 years after the Skelton brothers vanished, a significant development in the case emerged, bringing renewed attention to an investigation that had long gone cold. John Skelton, the boys' father, was charged with 3 counts of open murder and 3 counts of tampering with evidence, marking a critical shift in a case that had baffled investigators and devastated a family for over a decade. John had already been serving a 10 to 15-year sentence for unlawful imprisonment after pleading no contest to that charge in 2011, and he was set to be released from prison in November 2025. But this new round of charges changed everything. Instead of being freed, John now faced the possibility of life in prison, as the evidence against him had been reevaluated in light of new findings. Investigators now asserted that John Skelton killed his sons, a claim they had previously suspected but could not prove. The boys' bodies had never been found, but the new charges suggested that John had disposed of their bodies during that critical window when his phone pinged in Ohio on the night of their disappearance. The charges marked a turning point in the case, bringing new hope for Tanya Zuvers, the boys' mother, and others who had long been seeking justice for Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner. For 15 years, they had been haunted by the uncertainty of their fates, waiting for the day when the truth would finally be revealed. This new legal development offered a chance for closure, and it seemed that justice might finally be within reach, and that brings us to the end of this case. What are your thoughts on this case? Which of the theories are you for? What do you think really happened to these kids? Let us know in the comments. If this story shook you, there's more on the channel that dives into cases just as haunting. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this video. It helps keep these stories from being forgotten. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.